Let's talk about something new and exciting. Casting your request input into a specific type. Hi, I'm Nick. I create PHP and Laravel videos that are easy to follow. So I created a package called Cambia that'll allow you to cast your attributes just like your model attributes. This package is called Cambia. Here's the URL. It's github.com/nickescobedo/cambia. It gives instructions on how to install and how to use it, etc., but we're going to go through that right now, so no need to worry. So the first thing you'll need to do is do a composer require nickescobedo/cambia, and then it'll install everything. So let's go through how we might use this when talking about perhaps like an ordering system. So right here, I just have a blank page. We're going to just add little bits and pieces here and there, and we're going to dump the output so you can see the specific types and see that it is indeed casting it to the specific type. Here we have the blank controller that's serving the blank page. Let's start adding to it. Again, we're talking about things in the context of an ordering system. So with an ordering system, you might have something that deals with quantity. So let's have our first cast be something related to quantity. First, I am just going to dump the request, and we need to add the request. So if we're going to go the typical way, it would be like this, and we would do request, input, and quantity. Let's go back to our page. Refresh, nothing's happening because we don't have quantity in there. But if we add quantity, and let's say the quantity was 3. Okay, so we can see that quantity isn't coming back as a string, which may or may not be a problem for your particular system, but if I'm working with a quantity, I would want that to be a number. So let's add this as our first cast. You're going to have to create a form request in Laravel. So PHP artisan make request, and I'm going to name this casting request. Let's open up casting requests. This is where the fun begins. So in my package, I created a trait called cast request attributes. This is necessary. This will call the necessary functions in order to cast the properties to whatever you told it to cast to. Let's define quantity here. So let's say quantity must be numeric. So this is all fine. Let's go ahead and test this. Okay, so this still works. If we were to do ABC, well, it's not doing anything still because we have to add the request into here, casting request. And let's see if it does anything now. Okay, it tried to redirect back because the validation failed. And that's intended. It just doesn't have anywhere to go to because we started here. So again, I'm going to add 1, 2, 3. And this brings up a good point. We added that trait, but we did not add the cast function. So we need to add a cast function because that's what's going to tell our application to cast it. So public function casts. And we're going to do an array just like this. So just like your model attributes, we say quantity, and then we're going to say int. If we go back to the controller, and we add a function called request casted input, that's how you get the input that is casted. So now we're going to be dumping two things. We're going to dump the original one that came through the request, and then we're also going to be dumping the casted one that is running through the package. Let's refresh. And now we can clearly see the difference between the two. One of them is a string, and one of them is an integer. Now let's talk about what happens if you were to do 123.34. Well, we can still see that it gets casted to an integer. So again, That may or may not work for your particular use case, but we can see how that might be helpful. Let's change this, though, to a float and see what happens. So if we say that this can be a float, let's see what happens. Aha, so now the number is exactly as it was in the string, but it's now an actual float. Now we can do the same thing with decimal. Let's do decimal. Decimal's a little different. You have to specify to how many decimal places you'd like. So we're just going to say 1 for now. And for decimals, those get automatically put back into a string, but we can see that it did indeed limit it to 1 decimal point. Let's talk about our next cast. And again, we're talking about an ordering system. And in an ordering system, you might have an order date. And it might be very important to have the order date converted into a date object at the request level instead of converting it somewhere else. So let's add that into our URL. Order date, and this is going to be 2024 10/14. And it's not going to do anything. We're not dumping it yet, but let's take a look at what that would look like if we are adding it to our casts. So let's dump the request input order date. Let's just show that it is nothing more than a string at the moment. Okay, here we go. It's just a string. All right, so if we go back into here, whenever you're trying to cast something, it must be a part of some sort of validation first. Otherwise, it simply won't work. So we need to add date validation in here. If we say that date must be a date, for example, and then we add it to our cast. So we want this to be a date. Okay, we've just got our date here. Let's go and add that to the dump statement. So casted input and then order date. So the reason this didn't work was because I typed in the keys wrong. We should probably type in the keys right. So if we go order date and order date, we should see it come through. So when I refresh here, so we can see that the first one is a string and the second one is a carbon date object. And we can see that the date is 2024 10/14. Super awesome. Again, this at the request level, you're now getting these types of objects and specific casts and types, which will make working with your stuff in your application much easier because all of these things are done at the very beginning instead of trying to do that while you're doing your business logic. Another super helpful cast is turning things into collections. Personally, I really enjoy working with collections, so turning something into a collection, again, at the request level will be super helpful. So going along with the ordering system, let's say you might have multiple items and you want those items to be a part of some sort of collection. So let's add those items. All right, so in the URL, we're going to do items, and then we have to specify that it's going to be an array. And so we're going to say item 1 and items again, and then item 2. So let's dump items. Okay, so dump request input items. And Laravel by default will automatically turn this into an array. But again, we prefer working with collections. So we're going to have it casted to a collection. We can see that here's the array, item 1, item 2. All right, so again, we have to add it into here. And we can say that this is an array. And in here, this is where the magic happens. We can say collection. Let's dump the casted input. And here we can see we now have a collection with both of those items. So then you've got all of your awesome functions and methods that you like to do to manipulate collections. Super easy, super awesome, highly recommend. All right, so the last cast a completely custom cast. So we're going to add, let's just say again, our ordering system has some sort of total, and this total takes in a number, and we are going to cast it, do some specific manipulations on it, so that way it works in some other external system. So our total is going to be 112 cents. Let's create a new class to handle this custom cast, and we're going to put it in this request cast folder here. We're going to name this cents cast. What we're going to do is we are going to take the number in the total and we are going to convert it to cents. And in order to do this, we have to implement a interface. This interface is called cast request attributes, and we're going to use PHP Storm here to add in the missing function. In order to convert that $100.12, we need to first cast it to a float. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the value times 100, and that'll give us the cents. So now we need to go back to our request. And here we need to say the total needs to be numeric. And over here, this is where we do our custom cast. So if we say total cast cents or cents cast, and this is what will do all the custom transformations for us. So if you've got specific needs in your application where the default ones just don't cut it, this is how you do a custom one. All right, let's go back to our controller and let's dump the total. Here we got total here, and then request, casted input, total. All right, awesome. So what we've got now is 10,012. And we can see that we also have this, this little .0 here. If we wanted to, we could do some sort of formatting. Again, additionally, if you didn't want the .0, that's coming from this right here. So let's look at all of these together. If I undo all of these, let me go back to the page. This package makes it incredibly easy to keep your types super tight. Again, if you're working in a team, this is one thing that I think is a non-negotiable about keeping really good types in your type system, so that way one person isn't working with one thing and another person isn't working with another thing. These things are all native or specific types, so that way everybody is on the same page. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I enjoyed talking about kind of the cool things that we can do with casted inputs and how it might help your teams and your applications. I'd love to hear where you might think this is helpful in your applications or how you might use something like this. Like, comment, and subscribe as it helps my channel immensely. And again, I'm Nick and I make PHP and Laravel videos. Thanks for watching.